It's the 22nd of June 2022. Google doesn't put the date in your description. After a few weeks, it disappears. So it's a good thing I got a habit where I say the date and the year. Is it a crime to say the date and the year? So we got a poll. I know everybody's like, haven't we done this poll 1,000 times already, Mr. Durnford? Give or take one or two. Should the degenerate United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency, aka IAEA, be tried for extermination of all the species? Um, 100% votes? Now, I know what you're saying, Dana. You put degenerate in there. You skewered the poll. Well, I don't always do that. Sometimes I'll be politically correct. This time I'm not. That time I'm not. These creatures, how come they don't have any human attributes? How does that actually work? So he goes around shaking hands and getting his picture taken, right? He's not the shaker and mover. United Nations, the crazies are the shakers and movers. These are the great pretenders. Oh yeah, that's right. I checked to see if they shipped the DCA. Again, it says Wednesday, but it's completed customs clearance 416 yesterday in Vancouver, Canada. It's on the right side of the border, headed this way in first gear the whole way across the country, I bet you. Did birds wash ashore on an island, puzzling the wildlife officials? And it's under the category of government and nature and science. On Tuesday, it was widely reported the cause was the avian influenza. However, a town and state official has not confirmed the information, so stop with the fear-mongering. The Post cited hundreds of dead cormorants, which are divers like gannets that we covered last week and all the other species. That was such a strange video where baby raccoons and baby foxes and baby whatever were the first victims of the influenza in different counties in the United States. It was and Canada, right? Canada was puking up skunks in Alberta. Who the freak checks skunks in Alberta? They're the farthest away from the ocean you can get. The report was later questioned by the island bird and wildlife experts. Well, we've been watching this play out for, shortly after Fukushima nuclear meltdowns, we started noticing the Pacific Ocean acting weird and the Atlantic and the species. And within a couple of years, we were witnessing unprecedented extinction level events. And seems like yesterday, because I never stopped, so every day is yesterday. The Post has cited hundreds of dead cormorants. These are divers like the gannets and the ones that were dying in the United Kingdom. The 69 dead great shearwaters. So cormorants and shearwaters washing up on island beaches. And last week, 36 shearwaters. We've seen the shearwaters die off as they migrate to Australia and not show up recently. Well, in the last year we reported on it. But he says we always find dead shearwaters in June. Well, it seems that way, right? Because the nuclear meltdown was 11 years removed, and most people got sucked in on the tsunami, and that was pretty mad. It's hard not to. And shortly after, they get Osama bin Laden, and Steve Jobs dies, and Kim Jong-il dies, and Michael Jackson dies, and Prince Philip, and he gets married, and there's the uprising over in Egypt with Mubarak. So there's a lot of news that year, a lot of distractions. You might not have heard about it, but Fukushima ain't going away for another million years, so it's never too late to get up to speed. So they've been finding shearwaters, and now also in hundreds of dead cormorants. So that's two different species. Both of those species are deep divers, same as the gannets are deep divers. Warning issued on Martha's Vineyard as hundreds of dead cormorants are found across the island. Because these couple of news stories come out, I figured I might as well cover them before we jump into the lunatic nuclear news cycle. Hundreds of dead cormorants washing up all over the island. Said it received information regarding high numbers of birds dying of the avian influenza in Scotland. But you're in Martha's Vineyards. You're on the other side of the friggin' ocean. Why are you talking about them over on the other side of the ocean for? Like, that's the strangest connotation. Should be taken seriously because it's happening in Scotland and Ireland too, which we covered right in that marathon 2 hours and 50-minute presentation last weekend. Received information regarding high numbers of birds dying of the influenzas, but it wasn't, was it? They can't, this was just all species across the board were magically appearing right across the continent in the weirdest places. A couple of little baby over here of otters and coyotes, and it's just the weirdest propaganda you ever seen. It's structured, right? It's actual propaganda. It can infect humans through contact with sick birds. The British, the Queen owns the dead animals that wash up. So they're recruiting shooters for migratory birds coming in, landing in farmland. In some places. The outbreak has been the largest, the longest ever experienced in the United Kingdom and many parts of Europe. More than 120 cases so far in this country. In past years, a few tens of birds tested positive, and the numbers of cases so far, not died of it, but tested positive. The number of cases so far this season were unheard of. Oh yeah, no, crossed all species. Even King Kong got it, I heard. Hollywood had to stop shooting. He said you normally expect to see it peak over the winter months as the virus comes in from Eurasia, and you'd expect it to peter out and disappear during the spring. You might be spending the summer in Europe on vacation, Dana, which it hasn't done before. Just find someone that don't know nothing and rambles and print that, right, media? Oh, God, here we go. Let's get back to the poll, because every friggin' story is, the UN is in it somewhere, which is just a corporation like McDonald's. Except there are 195 militaries with an attitude. And different crazies every 6 months in charge of it. So he's the Raphael Grossi. He's the current head honcho. He runs around getting his picture taken, shaking hands. Big shot. living in the top notch hotels and eating exotic foods, and like when he goes to dinner, it's 8-course meals all the time, and he goes, no, the children can have this much radiation. It's good for them. Make them taller. The actual demons. So the question was, should degenerate United Nations, International Atomic Energy Agency, also known as scumbags, be tried for omnicide for an extinction level event? We got a stunning 18 votes already. Gee. 10 years of hard work right there, folks. Too costly, too slow, and too dangerous. So Boris Johnson, of course, which, let's face it, right? Boris is not the sharpest. His job is to shake hands and regurgitate whatever the water boy tells him, you know. He does any big questions, he calls up the Queen, or even worse, Prince Philip. You know why you never see Prince Philip picture too often? Because everybody freaks out when he sees it and says, what the frig is that? It's hilarious, hey? His mom won't give up the seat. So she's waiting for Prince Philip to die, then she'll die probably. You're not getting it, you were a bastard child. Not everyone agrees the Green Party tweeted in March nuclear power is too costly, too slow, too dangerous, and that the suggestion it could supposedly solve the nuclear energy crisis was disappointing. Because they got to be politically correct, right? So they say at Fukushima, one death was attributed to direct radiation exposure, while official death tolls counted 573 people who died as a result of being evacuated and stress-induced health problems. So it's absurd to suggest that only one person died. It's absurd. It's disappointing. It's an insult. I disrespect you for doing it too. Hang on, because done it again. There we go. I'll get it. Mine. It's just that we moved and everything's different. It all comes back to you, don't it? Here's one of my favorite crazies. Well, there's one street there where 7 people died on it in Fukushima Prefecture. The hell is the name of that place? Oh, no, now I know I'm losing my mind. I can't remember. Koriyama, see? Extreme increases in mortality. In a single month in a community in Fukushima Prefecture was extra 12,700 people died of heart attacks, not counting everything else. There was a spike in heart attacks, heart problems, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, right over. Now, that was just in a single month of an abnormality. So disrespectful to claim that only one person died. You really got to be a monster to print that and put your name on it. And the people who evacuated late and into a vicious plume from multiple nuclear meltdowns. The best way to look at that is think about this model from France. And so this is a 16-day model of radioactive fallout. So imagine that radiation is covering the entire planet in 16 days. Imagine how bad it actually is at ground zero. Then you appreciate why these numbers are significant. Because how can you exclude that? How does that actually work? What kind of a twisted and sadistic, demonic... Oh, well, the International Atomic Energy Agency will ignore it, Dana. We got a massive 13 people on the show. Just killing it here tonight. In the case of Chernobyl, 31 people are known to have died as a direct result of acute radiation exposure. 31 people. 31. Really? This is what you do for a living? You what are you trying to be funny? 'Cause it's not funny. It's disappointing, but it's not funny. Come on, bring it on home to Dana. Where you to? Oh, we got both. Just bear with me. I'll play this one. Over 600 of these helicopter pilots died in the first couple of weeks.
It was heroism.
During this operation, 600 pilots are fatally contaminated with radiation. All of them will die. But their efforts only buy a few days. Although it has been covered over, the fire still isn't out.
600 helicopter pilots.
And well at Chernobyl,
Sorry. Let me fix that. Because sometimes I can't get access when I import certain videos. Because this one here is a presentation for Harvard University directly after Fukushima with 3 experts. I should do that one a couple more times because the guy in the middle with the red tie on says the surrounding communities were getting hits sustained with 10 sieverts an hour of radioactive plumes. And they always put their head down like they're in church or something.
and well at Chernobyl, the helicopter pilots that came in and that deposited the heavy materials to try to put down that fire, which was a very different kind of event than what we're looking at now, but still there were helicopters, and the pilots all died from radiation exposure. Here's a decision question.
They all 600 of them. You see the weasel there with to your left? Do you know that guy? He's quite the weasel, that guy. So to say 31 people are known to have died, I don't understand what's the big deal in being honest. Yeah, 600 helicopter pilots died, tens of thousands of slave labor that were shanghaied, sent in on the roof. Literally, they had humans go on the roof and pick up part of the fuel and throw it down. They got 25 seconds. All of them got pensions. They ran through thousands and thousands because you can only spend 25 seconds there, and then you went home and suffered for the rest of your life. With those kind of doses, your organ starts to melt at about 20-25 seconds. So you run away from the X-rays, the neutron burst, the gamma shine, but those organs have been changed and cauterized in some cases with radiation. Safety concerns. Despite the lives lost in the tragic accidents, again, they say nuclear is far safer than fossil fuel. And they claim that 5 to 8 million people a year die. This all started from James Hansen, a single testimony in the 80s, and everybody's still regurgitating that narrative. That's the only narrative the scumbags are allowed to use. This is how it actually works. I'll find it for you. It's hilarious. Nothing's hilarious when it comes to nuclear, but it's hilarious how simple this actually is. Where did I put that? That's the problem. James Hansen, where you to, baby? Well, I guess I'm going to have to go type those words in. That sucks. Because you get the book thrown at you when you type in James Hansen on my computer. He's somebody who should be arrested. Yeah, it took me all day to find that. Wow. Here we go. Let's run through it. So James Hansen and another guy wrote a paper. Mr. Dr. Death himself. He won the Nobel Prize equivalent in Taiwan for promoting nuclear power, that creature did. Under proposed solutions at his Wikipedia page, estimated 1.8 million air pollution caused deaths were prevented between 1971 and 2009 through the use of nuclear power instead of fossil fuel. Right, like some people says it's like a banana and it's harmless like a potato chip, or walking in the sunshine and getting on an airplane. Hansen said that nuclear was saving lives. And so, like, it works this way. If they actually cured an animal of cancer, they would kill it, of course, because that's the nuclear industry, and then put it in a back of a transport truck with all kinds of lights and everything, go to every school in every country and show, we cured cancer. Billions of dead animals, but we finally done it. We're not sure how, but we done it. So they went from over 25 years, was it? Between 1971 2009. 28 years. With 64,000 deaths a year. 64,000. 64,000 a year. But the propaganda says between 5 and 8 million people a year die of the same pollution. These are lunatics. They die from radioactive fallout because it covers the whole planet and you can't escape it. You're drinking it, breathing it, eating it, washing your clothing, getting bats in it, walking in it. Gets in your body, it pulses energy every second. The same with the environment. This is why we call it climate change. You don't have to be really smart to figure this out. Once I show it to you, you're like, okay, well, gas, oil, and coal doesn't cover the planet in plumes, pulsing energy every second for millions of years, Dana. Kind of got a good point. Now, the fuel pools are just disgusting, what they're doing to the planet. Nuclear power, air pollution. Nuclear is the most carbon-intensive thing on the planet. I proved that last night's show. The iNews site science writer Tom Chivers thinks nuclear power has something of a PR problem. Really? Something like a PR problem. I think they got too much PR, isn't it? I'll show you what I mean here. We'll get to it. Watch the rush. Here's the craziest PR stunt you're ever going to see. You're actually never going to see anything crazier than this. She's going to try to convince you she's in a fuel pool on the top of a building to the left that doesn't even exist.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
So I can't tell the difference. Can you tell the difference? Public opinion about its safety does appear to be changing. Latest YouGov data, YouGov, government doing their own polls in the nuclear universities probably. I get all the nuclear students in on the poll. I found 22% of the UK adults believe nuclear power to be unsafe, and 60% believes it's safe. Really? Well, that's mighty convenient. Come show them one of my videos and see what the result is after that, I wonder. It's not only the UK that is looking at nuclear energy. Again, this is straw man. They're just using straw man. France has somewhat led in recent years. France has led the way in recent years. France built their reactors all at the one time. Basically same as the American. And they haven't replaced them. They extended their lives to even stupider. 70% of its power now. No, 70% of its power have been coming from there for 40 years or something. At the same time, they had irradiated every human, animal, insect, bird, mammal, animal in the French Polynesian Islands and in Niger. They had an endless civil war even going on today so they can get their cheap uranium. They destroyed the government and all the communities and all the opposition and armed the rebels who wanted to overthrow the country and loot it, so that the French can get their cheap uranium, high-grade uranium. That's worth killing their country over, isn't it? Everybody on the planet should be humiliated by that, by the way. Pulitzer Prize-winning historian and journalist Richard Rhodes and Greenpeace UK's policy director. Greenpeace's UK policy director. Should I get a nuclear proctologist UK policy director too, I wonder? This week on episodes of The Overview. The whole story was pure propaganda. Can you imagine what these creatures are going to do when they get on? I got to find that and come out and curb stomp them when they finally do it. Japan's top court clears the government of liability for Fukushima disaster. So they're claiming there's no way the government could have foreseen a tsunami that big. And they tried. They really did. They hired experts and they tried to foresee where the tsunami was coming from. But the tsunami came from the other direction. So therefore, they're not obligated to pay the victims. Yeah? Try wrapping your mind around that. Yeah, they done studies. Let me show it to you. This should make you just sick to your guts. If not, the next story probably will, so hang around. Japan's highest court on the 17th of June dismissed claims that the government should pay damages in cases involving almost 4,000 people seriously affected by the nuclear disaster. And of course, they got to put the words triggered by the March earthquake and tsunami. You will never find the first part without that part immediately there. Usually in bold letters. This effectively absolves the state of any responsibility. Na. Decisions by the crazies, also known as the Supreme Court's second petty bench, The first for that court covered 4 lawsuits from 3,700 people in Fukushima, the actual nuclear wasteland, Guma, another wasteland, Chiba, which is, by the way, right by Tokyo, and Chiba is just brutal. Their water reclamation centers for filtering water for the communities. They can't get rid of it because it's so radioactive. Everybody is just brutalized. It's evil on a whole different scale, nuclear. At the head of it seems to be United Nations. The ruling men's, the Tokyo Electric Power Holding, which is nationalized, right, is the government, because they were flat broke right away. Operators, because they're on the stock market, which unequivocally should be illegal. It's just blows my mind that nuclear power plants are on the stock market. Is solely responsible just over $10.35 million. They're bitching over $10 million for 4,700 victims. I'll get that wrong way now. The ruling means Tokyo Electric Power Company operated Fukushima is solely responsible for just over $10.35 million in damages in the 4 lawsuits. Court established TEPCO's liability in March for the first time because they had one in other courts. The key point was whether the government in TEPCO was able to forecast the huge tsunami. How could you not? Japan is, for thousands of years, the archaeologists have been able to show unequivocal that they've had tsunamis higher than any in recent memories. So another one's coming. The continental shelf is right there, 50 miles off the coastline, whatever it is. It's right off the coastline. So when the continental shelf goes dead, then that's a tsunami. So you got no time to run away. Just if there's a hill there and you can make it, you'll survive. If not, you're going through the wood chipper. The government in TEPCO, however, insists that the assessment was not established knowledge. And even if they had foreseen a tsunami higher than the site of the plant, where they built the actual plant, and taken measures, they could not be held liable as the scale and the direction of the actual tsunami differed from estimates. Just let that sink in. So they had an estimate of how big a tsunami could be, and they built it accordingly to that estimate. So therefore, when you had one, no matter which direction it came from, as long as it wasn't the one that they estimated, and the direction, they couldn't, like, California could say they couldn't estimate a tsunami was going to come from Japan and wash away property, right? But how could you not when you have a history of it? That's what these tsunamis, they're traveling at 400 to 600 miles per hour. Japan's whole coastline is chewed up from millenniums of tsunamis from the continental plate shifting. It's like saying, well, it's the continental shelf's fault, sue the continental shelf because it slipped and caused a tsunami, not TEPCO. But because the scale and direction of the actual tsunami differed from the estimate, they're not liable. And that's the government talking, because TEPCO was nationalized. Of the roughly 30 damaged suits seeking compensation from TEPCO since 2013 by more than 12,000 people, which is shocking, it is that few, lower courts have issued rulings in 23. In 12 cases, court acknowledged that the government and the utilities were negligent in preparing for the tsunami, similar to the one that struck the facility. In another 11, court ordered only TEPCO to pay the damages. But this is nuclear. This is totally different. This is not gas and oil or coal. They break down, you just fix it and get it running again. Nuclear plant run breaks down. 55 countries banned the food from 14 prefectures. Don't feel bad to the victims, because after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Japanese government refused to acknowledge people ingested radiation and denied them medical help for 76 years. Heartless. The whole industry's legacy is it kills everything but humans. Humans are all magically immune to it. Even though we know unequivocally this is simply not the case, plaintiffs for the lawsuits demand the government pay compensation for Fukushima accident and walk to the Supreme Court. Well, the idea of TEPCO still existing, of course, is instead of blaming nuclear or blaming the government, you blame TEPCO. TEPCO is a fictitious company. So you blame the shareholders that you'll never know who they are, because that's how this works. Nuclear explained International Atomic Energy Agency. Gee, that's quite the coincidence, because we got a poll tonight for nuclear. Hi, everybody. Kevin, Dana, Port Angeles, Angel's Place. Funny get to say hi to Angel's Place, because she usually watches it at a different time. We got 36 votes on a poll. Now, I know everybody's like, oh, God, not a poll on United Nations again, Dana. I know. What are you supposed to do, though, right? Just a poll that got to get made tonight, unfortunately. Should the degenerate UN International Atomic Energy Agency, also known as the nuclear scumbag IAEA, be tried for exterminating all the species on our planet? I think it's a legitimate question. And I'm offended that you don't. Not really. These are demons. And when we do these shows, there's no way that you can say they're not demons. There isn't. It's impossible to say that this particular lot, this bunch of savages, and these are cowards. But it's impossible not to say and he represents the industry, the international. He's the face of the industry, right? I couldn't care less about him. He's irrelevant. He's just a pump for the industry, see? He's a lobbyist. That's all he really is. He's a disgusting one, too. So the Nether's claiming nuclear reactors, this is the IAEA, coming out explaining nuclear reactors. Oh, it took them 70-something years to... Nuclear explain, nuclear reactors in the future, nuclear power, the future, so they're promoting genocide. And so they have a retired professor from Vienna, nuclear professor, a former deputy secretary of the nuclear energy of Argentina, and the director of nuclear installation safety at International. This is absurd to suggest that the International Atomic Energy Agency has a division with safety in it. It's absolutely just you can't actually prove that. All we see is the complete opposite. And this group of creatures, they're not even supposed to exist. They don't have sovereignty of any country. They can't arrest anybody, blah, 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 blah. They have no... But for some reason, the entire planet is voodooed into being told by a mental idiot. Safety Commission, this is just a horror show tonight. Horror. Safety Commission renews the license for the Nova Scotia nuclear station for 10 extra years. And we covered that when it showed up in the news recently. They wanted a 25-year extension at this disease factory here in eastern Canada in the Bay of Fundy. The biggest, highest tides in the world, and to put a nuclear plant there instead of tidal energy. It's humiliating. The Federal Commission has given New Brunswick Power the all clear to continue producing nuclear energy in southern New Brunswick for at least another 10 years. Now go poison all of them. The Canadian, there is no such. There's the Canadian Non-Safety Commission. That to call them the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission is an actual crime. That's an actual crime. That should be illegal. Like a $50 fine every time you say it. It also concluded that New Brunswick Power will make adequate provisions for the protection of the environment, the health, and the safety of persons. You know, the people that... So how, like when your nuclear plant melts down, here's what happens. It covers, the radiation fallout covers the entire planet. How are you going to stop that again, there, scumbags? So for them to come out and claim that they can stop that, they're going to protect people from that, which is what has been said about every plant that melted down. And we see 1,800 illnesses. And we covered this bizarre story here. Emergency responders assure nuclear regulators they're prepared. What the hell are they talking about? They don't got to do jack shit. At Sellafield was Windscale, when that melted down, the police took buses and guns, went to the theaters and got volunteers. They didn't have emergency responders go there. That's crazy talk. You got to get all the homeless and destitute, you send them in there. Like, do they really think they're going to last in that environment more than a few minutes without getting a lethal dose? You know, in Japan, it was 680 kilometers of the coastline was washed away. Nobody drove a truck in 680 kilometers. There's no street lights because the telephone poles for 680 kilometers got washed away. You couldn't plug an extension cord in because all the sockets got washed out to sea for 680 kilometers. There was 2,000 square kilometers of debris floating in the Pacific Ocean after the tsunami, the size of Texas. Hey, go live your fantasy. This is a real lesson in this story right here. Here we go. UK decision on support for Sizewell C nuclear power plant may come in July, EDF says, which is France. EDF is France. Because the United Kingdom are too stupid to build their own nuke. Despite having nuclear colleges, they're still too stupid to build their own nuke plant. So there's the picture they showed you. But here's the diagrams for it. Surrounded by farms as far as you can see. But this is what they show you, look. There's the diagram. Surrounded by farms that poison you for thousands of years. It's absurd to have a farm within 1,000 miles of a nuclear power plant. To have it right on your border, that's not an accident. That's not an accident. That's an agenda. The majority of nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms and the fuel reprocessing mixed oxide facilities, which are legal in Canada and the United States because they're so friggin' evil. But how evil to show you this picture when they should be showing you that picture? Because that's the design for Sizewell C. 8,000 men working there yesterday, apparently, because we covered it. Seeks to become carbon neutral by the middle of the century. You can't become carbon neutral by using nuclear, stupid. Nuclear is the most carbon intensive thing on the planet. It uses 16 million glasses of water a minute. Each glass got 1 billion creatures into it. Going to boil 16 million billion creatures and eggs and larvae every minute, 1,440 minutes a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And they're going to call that carbon-free. Each nuclear power plant needs 2 external power supplies, coal, gas, and oil, dedicated to these huge, massive sites. And I showed you that yesterday in page, you're new around here. Sizewell Sea, which is right there, surrounded by farms. By the middle of the century. A critical milestone in July with the government's investment decision. Critical moment. One of the biggest robberies in UK history. The most expensive project in UK's history. UK government has outlined ambitions to triple nuclear capacity. The UK government, which won't even, they look at 2050, but the next government might scuttle everything too, right? Because that's how that works. I mean, when you look at nuclear was scuttled in South Korea last year. They got a new government this year. Nuclear is back strong as ever. We're going to build it all over the planet now. We love nuclear. Crazies. Has an estimate price tag of $24.5 billion. Climbs by another $500 million every month or so. And the food will be the cheapest in the supermarket. There's 1,800 illnesses from eating that radiation. You got to be some super evil to build a nuclear plant in farmland, and you got to be incredibly gullible not to appreciate the significance. Because the nuclear power plant, once you put fuel in the pools, you're hemorrhaging. They're still splitting the atom all day. Not making power for 1 million homes anymore. They're making cancers and illnesses and diseases for millions of people now. And insects and birds and mammals and animals. Nuclear power in Canada. There's some weird demon right there. Hey, look at this creature. What the hell? He looks like something right off a Hollywood screen as super evil. Oh, it's the Globe and Mail. Ew! The UN, which reminds me, we got a poll tonight. Did I mention we got a poll tonight? UN poll? Should the degenerate UN's International Atomic Energy Agency, also known as scumbag IAEA, be tried for omnicide, which is an extermination of all species? We got 41 votes, 28 thumbs up. People feel pretty strong about this one. Liking it. The UN. Japan research group developed high-yield, salt-resistant. Remember the radioactive cesium resistance? As if cesium's the only thing that comes from a nuclear meltdown, even if you could make it. Where are we to? We got to get rid of that for a second. Japan's research group develops high-yield, salt-resistant rice strain in a nuclear wasteland. Sad that people are being deceived, tricked into doing that. The 2011 tsunami flooded 21,000 hectares of coastal farmland, just farmland, stretching from Tohoku regions to the Kanto regions, and 10% of the Miyagi prefecture's arable land. So that's a huge chunk of the country right there. That's around 500, 600 kilometers right there. The researchers found the roots of the improved indica rice plants sat on top of the soil, sucking up the radiation instead, as opposed to extending in the ground, as was the case with the standard type. Salt makes soil more clay-like, which reduces oxygen and makes it difficult for plant roots to absorb water, affecting the growth. So if the roots are grown on top of the soil in a nuclear wasteland, then the rice is less prone to be affected by the soil's condition. You're more likely to buy it and get sick and die later. Gotcha. That's downright brilliant. That's brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Where are you to? Oh my God, I'm lost. Hang on, I'll get there. Oh, they had an earthquake. Oh, sorry. Wait for it. I have it right there. Right here. I'll fix this in a second. So there was 2 earthquakes, one on the 20th, one on the 21st yesterday. Left 6 people injured on the 20th, the first one. Struck the same region as Japan over recent days. Now they're issuing a warning for more aftershocks in the coming days and weeks, raising concern of a potential major earthquake waiting to occur in an unspecified point in time. Yeah, it's like trying to hold a fart, Dana. A 5.4 magnitude earthquake on the international scale, because these are a real tricky bunch down there. They're pretty slick. The tremor also causes property or infrastructural damages. A 5.0 magnitude earthquake struck the same region on the morning of Monday. Now, these were magnitude is the Japan scale. Taiwan does that too. It's very confusing, but they do it because of the nuclear, to downplay the danger to the nuclear sites. It gives them time to come up with a cover story. Could reportedly continue and generate aftershocks for further earthquakes, not only next week, but also in the next several months. Japan has hit a number, in recent years, a number of earthquakes that are just, I'll show you couple pictures from them. Hang on, I think I can find it. I think I could find it. Talking about an earthquake, baby, this evening. An earthquake, baby, tonight. Oh, yeah, 2018 Aikido. Where are you two boys? Oh, here we go. It's hard to appreciate, so give me a second. Bear with me. I have a perfect way of telling the story. No, that's not it. Gotcha. Okay, so in 2018, they had an earthquake that was extraordinary. I'll put it on the big screen. See the landslides? Now take a look at that. Try wrapping your mind around all sides of the mountains slid away. So they said the earthquake was a 6.7. But very few of them told you, in fact just a couple, out of the hundreds reports said it was on the Japanese scale, which was an intensity scale of 7, which meant it was a 9.5 earthquake. And when you look at it, everybody, they sent in 22,000 rescuers on top of that, 4 million people without power, but they kept calling it a 6.7. And it was right by a nuclear power plant in Aikido, which is the Northern Islands. Just hang on. I guess I should show you that before we run away. Run away. Okay, this will finish it. So earthquake buries homes under landslides in Quito, 2018 in September. It was a 6.7 on a Japanese scale of 7. So it was a 9.4, 9.6. So you see where the nuclear power plant is? The next frame will show you the red and the X. That's where the ground, it was on land, really close to the nuclear power plant. And so they hit it. And look at the damage everywhere. My goodness. My goodness. And you can be sure the nuclear industry, International Atomic Energy Agency had a hand in that. South Korea is now going to boost nuclear energy. The nuclear industry was throwing cocktail parties and everything when that came out. South Korea's new president is doing a 180 on the nuclear energy in the country, in the company. The previous administration was going to phase out scumbag nuclear entirely. President Yoon Suk Yeol wants to put South Korea back on the map as a nuclear energy superpower. But see, the next president of the country might decide to scuttle nuclear right away. And because by then, they won't even have the foundations of what they're crying about now. This is all posturing. Renewables have taken over. This is just paying homage to the nuclear industry so they feel good. Plans on extending the lives of working reactors, which can be scuttled with the next administration. Bringing the existing dormant reactor online will take them 10, 12 years. The next administration will just cancel it. It's basically posturing because the nuclear industry is very well placed. You got 2 new reactors are being designed, so 10, 20, 30 years down the road. 35, 40. Nuclear is crazy. Let's keep going here. I can flash through it, but we put more time and metaphorically distance between the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan and the ultra-tight energy market put the need for nuclear energy into perspective. No, it didn't. It put the need for renewables. Last year was 333 nuclear power plants, 291 gigawatts of renewables came online. That's equal to building 333 nuclear power plants. Between 2020 and 2026, the International Energy Agency, not the scumbag International Atomic Energy Agency, but the International Energy Agency said by 2026 there will be 5,500 nuclear power plants worth of renewables online in the next 4 years. Well, since 2020, which is 4,800 gigawatts. So why would you step away from that and bust your nuts trying to build 2 or 3 gigawatts of nuclear? Because you're insane. You know, they'll get that much maybe, right? Let's keep it rolling. In fact, a 2013 study by NASA, there goes credibility, says nuclear energy has actually saved lives that would have otherwise been lost due to the causes associated with pollution from fossil fuels that nuclear has displaced. Nuclear, of course, has 2 external coal, gas, or oil plants dedicated to it 24 hours a day. To build it, to run it, and decommission it for 100 years, basically. I probably never mentioned it before, I know. I get slack sometimes, and poor judgment, lack of sleep. So nuclear has to have a couple of external power plants dedicated to the nuclear site, because nuclear can't run on its own energy. Like this fable that nuclear, I know it's an agenda. I know. I'm showing you every single media has subscribed to this. Every single so-called journalist has refused to acknowledge it's just a complete hoodwink. But hey, the model made by the scientists at NASA Goddard over the past 50 years, nuclear saved an incredible 1.8 million lives. Right, we remember that story earlier, where buddy was 6 to 9 million a year dies. I showed you Hansen's study, and now they're referring to it in this article. 60,000 a year is what they're claiming. Nuclear kills 6 million a year. The radioactive fallout, it never goes away, so it's always gathering up. It's like a snowstorm never stops worldwide, and the snow never melts. Well, flip it and call it radiation, where you can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it or feel it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it. But it gets in your body and destroys your immune system and fills your body up with white blood cells and displaces your red blood cells, which means you have a lack of oxygen. You're making irrational decisions, and now your body is more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless, are now lethal, particularly to the elderly and the children. Well, public, and this is true for species too, of course, all species. Well, public health is often the centerpiece of the anti-nuclear argument. Public health. Don't dwell on that very much, do we? Why is public health the centerpiece of the anti-nuclear argument? Because it kills all the species, not just humans. The real issue is climate change, which is caused by radioactive fallout. Don't worry, I'm only going to tell you 500 more times this year. This month. This week, okay. Climate change. What's not like about clock? Where do we leave off? Oh, over there. What do you got against climate change, you big bully? Well, this is radioactive fallout from Japan. Invisible plumes. It's been going on for 70 years. They never disappear, never go away. You just get more every day. Pulsing energy at the speed of light every second for millions of years. Hostile to everything with replicating cells. Coal, oil, and gas don't have those attributes. They don't make plumes covering the planet. Their plumes go about 50 miles. Public health is the centerpiece of the anti-nuclear, pro-life, of the smart people, right? Anti-nuclear means you're smart. In order to decarbonize the global economy fast enough to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, which was caused by Fukushima, if you go look at the supercell storms, are storms that are 200 plus miles per hour when they come ashore. And we know this is new because we don't have building codes worldwide anywhere for 200 mile per hour storms. Since Fukushima, we've seen almost all hurricanes, cyclones, typhoons. Not all. The majority of them each season are clicking at 200 plus miles per hour. And what that means is everything is turned into projectiles, lethal projectiles. Over the past decade, series of scandals in which thousands have we covered that about a month ago, thousands of counterfeit parts with fake documentation that was going on for 40-something years at different manufacturers, Mitsubishi, the big ones. We're faking the inspections, faking the safety on important parts for the nuclear generation sites. Sadistic. The country is bidding big on small modular reactors. Again, these are... the wind came out of their sail last week when there was a study published from Stanford showed that 35 times more intermediate level waste being produced by small modular reactors because they're not very efficient. Now I had to use a mixed oxide fuel. That there was 5 times more fuel per same capacity, and there was 30 times more high level waste. So 5 times more fuel is like the worst case scenario imaginable, and 30 times more high level waste is just absurd. Absurd. Really? You want to put thousands of these things on our planet? I'll personally fine every one of you and talk sense into you. These prefabricated reactors that don't exist, they're not even building one, for God's sakes. They've been saying this for about 35 years. Wake up. These prefabricated reactors are going to be made in factories, you say? Nobody's building factories. They're shipped out to other countries and set up on site. Couple of cotter pins. You got a little pull cord and then you run away and it'll run for 1,000 years. It's called a nuclear meltdown. Making nuclear power more affordable worldwide, increasing South Korea's global energy influence. So they got the word that nuclear is back on the table. Now they got to write some public relations stories to try to justify their expenses, right? And this is what they concoct. This is generations of... Obviously, that story is generation of inbreeds. Whoever the child is that wrote this, their parents were scumbags, and their parents were scumbags, and their parents were scumbags. $9 billion for climate tech startup in the first quarter of this year. Quite a bit for sure. Quite a bit for growing food inside. Gee, I wonder why. Radioactive fallout probably got nothing to do with it, Dana. $9 billion and 273 climate tech startups in the first quarter of the year. To just throw money at them, right? Because they're not going to threaten nuclear industry. That was $2.2 billion less than the $11.2 billion invested per quarter on average in 2021. Wow. Wash my mouth out with soap. How to speed up the rollout of nuclear power plants that don't even exist. These are lunatics, eh? If you go look up this story, a new scientist he found small modular reactors increase the volume of short-lived, low and intermediate level waste by up to 35 times compared to a conventional reactor. And waste produced per unit of electricity generated for the long-lived equivalent waste, small modular reactors will produce up to 30 times more, and for spent fuel up to 5 times more than a conventional reactor. So building these is a death sentence for your country, your oceans, your fresh water, and your planet and all species. China's going to unveil its most menacing warship. Even a nuclear bomb can't hurt it, I heard. Everybody gets 3 square meals a day. And they all look so spiffy in their nice, stupid-looking uniforms. To me, that's the worst that could happen to somebody is you join the military, usually because you don't know any better, right? Now you can't quit. Now you're a slave. Some like being a slave, so they excel. So 1,000 feet long, basically. Big, stupid misery machine. Weapons of mass destruction, that's what they are. How many suicide bombers does it take to equal one of those bad boys, I wonder? How many suicide bombers does it take to equal a single tank? Because, you know, the tanks, right, they're firing 155 millimeter depleted uranium munitions with a 900-foot kill ratio, and the radioactive fallout will cover tens and tens of miles. The first time an F-35 fighter, now the only people that fly them are the inbreeds of the inbreeds of the inbreeds. High-class inbreeds, armed with deadly AIM-120 missiles. Flex muscles at NATO, which is 30 militaries. I'm not saying that, that's what it says on the website. Newest facility, they're the little lapdog for United Nations. United Nations go, "Hoo, hoo," and NATO goes, in May, aka May, the U.S. troops, the zombies jacked up on vaccines, and other crazy, stupid people in uniform, NATO members, to demonstrate combat readiness. Well, come on, let's blow up the Ruskies. It looks like it's all staged, just like. You got to realize how do we get in all of these wars? Well, I happen to have a cute little video I can show you if you want to hang on. Don't be so pushy. Meet Patrick Clausen from the Washington Institute doing a press conference. Everybody's there to pick up their checks. How do you think we got into World War I, World War II, Vietnam, blah, 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 blah? Guess how?
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
So let me play that last part one more time.
Wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. In fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise to wait for Pearl Harbor.
Hang on. I want to do something. I'm going to go cut. Where the hell do you cut this? Oh, yeah.
So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
Okay, I'm going to cut it right here. Okay, here we go.
So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. So if, in fact...
Hang on. Let me cut this one. I got to do something.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran.
Okay, that's what I was looking for.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough.
So he thinks that crisis initiation is really tough, and it's very hard to see how this president can get us to war with Iran.
And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran.
So how do we get to war with Iran?
So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
And he told you about Vietnam and blah, 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 blah. That's how the world actually works. They had an earthquake. Did I miss that or something? Yeah, magnitude 6 earthquake strikes Japan's Bonin Island. That was yesterday. It was 25 miles deep. Shut up. These are very shallow earthquakes. They do a lot of damage. There's something going to happen down there. Chern is going to terminate work with the Ruskies. Oh, and Belarus. So Chern, which is an organization, so they're trying to keep the information, but they got around, shocking story again. Ignore that part of the story. It's home to the labs, the scientific lab. It's home to the world's largest atom smasher. Management Council made a decision. European Organization for Nuclear Research. So that's officially scumbags. Nearly 7% of 18,000 researchers were linked to Russia institutions before the war broke out. 7% of the 18,000 plus research. 18,000. They're not trying to come up with solutions for renewables or cure cancer or anything good. They're just trying to figure out how to split matter and antimatter so they can split the moon in two next. And you should take the big toy away from them, send them all down to Fukushima for 2 weeks, to the nuclear meltdowns. Come up with some solutions then. Language requiring all women to register for potential future military drafts. Let me go back. I skipped something, did I? Oh yeah, we're there and then who knows. Chern's Large Hadron Collider, the world's largest, most powerful, stupid hole in the ground, is in the process of launching its third run this summer. This is crazy. This stuff, this is crazy. U.S. Senator backs a $45 billion boost for 2023. $847 billion top line represents an 8% increase. So $817 billion is the budget next year. $847 billion for a misery machine. That's the military-industrial complex. United Nations will steal most of that. This addresses the effects of inflation, which is significant. You need $45 billion for inflation. Must be nice. It authorizes funding for additional military construction projects. The language was requiring all women to register for potential future military drafts. I have no idea what that actually means. It included a 4.6% pay raise, first one in 30 years probably, for the troops, and offers language requiring all women to register for potential future military drafts. Or we'll conscript you like we done with Vietnam. 2.7 billion for future munitions. 2.7 billion. 2.7 billion. That can't be that much. Hang on. Work with me. Let's get out the calculator. 2.7 billion. Where am I? Okay, so 2.7. This is just for 2023, right? So 2.7 billion divided by 365, because it's for 1 year, right? So that's an extra 7 million worth of munitions every day for every day of 2023. And divide that in an hour, 24. So every hour they need $308,000 for munitions. Every hour. Might as well divide that by every minute, I suppose. So every minute... Oh, what did I do there? Yeah. So every minute they need $5,136.98. So $5,000 a minute, every minute, 1,440 minutes a day, 365 days of 2023. The military needs that just for munitions. It's probably not a lot when you think how big this measuring machine actually is. Could it get any worse? Oh yeah, we need money for plutonium pits data. Need $5,000 a minute for plutonium pits. I should have thought about that. And gives the advanced, this is scary as it gets, gives the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency $30 million increase of their normal budget for artificial intelligence. So say the guy already got $100 million for artificial intelligence, they get an extra $30 million. Get the kinks out of it and enslave everything and everybody. Humbug is meant to mislead the masses. That's why we got a poll tonight for United Nations, meant to mislead the masses. We got 48 votes, 96% thinks that the scumbag UN International Atomic Energy Agency, also known as the scumbag IAEA, should be tried for omnicide, exterminating all species. Which I gotta say I'm pretty partial to. What's going on here? I'll fix it. Give me a second. This is not that hard. Right there. That's bang, bang, bang. Lebanon is turning to solar power. They've been doing that for a long time because they don't have reliable energy in the country. Obstacles to overcome, determining the impact of a high-frequency energy beam on communications, aviation traffic, and the health of the local population. Still obstacles to overcome, such as determining the impact of high-frequency, because they're going to beam energy from space, but it could affect, obviously, the local population. It could, the high-frequency, because the sun always shines in space. Rather than come up with storage solutions or something like that. This is this is China, so who knows? Aviation traffic and the health of the local population. The health. Now, why would you even talk about that unless there was a health issue that they're not acknowledging and telling you what it is, I should say? Completed testing and inspection on ground array intended to collect the space-based solar power. Well, what about bad weather, inclement weather? What about chemtrails blocking your... Because Lord knows you don't do enough of that around here. A decade. Now, remember this story. There was 10,000 people arrested for sedition, for protest. They were charged with sedition for protesting a nuclear power plant in, hang on, it's India, I do believe. They had 9,000, Dana. There was 9,000 people were booked for sedition. They were beaten up, too, by the police. And then they're dragged into court every couple of months for over a decade. And their crime was protesting peacefully, I might add, the establishment of a disease factory known as a nuclear power plant. The police beat the shit out of them because down there they use these sticks, and if you fight back, a dozen of them will beat on you. The real scumbags. Instead of protecting the population, they beat them and then held them hostages now for over a decade. 21 cases of sedition. Some people were charged with over 300 crimes. They figuratively, literally threw the book at these people. In a small fishing hamlet in Tamil Nadu Southern District, people continue to live with the trauma of the police actions they faced during the protest of the Kumla nuclear power plant 2012. Just 2 kilometers from the village. Well, they had every right to protest in that case, didn't they? Upending their lives since 2011. That's the nuclear industry. Charged with sedition. Can't get a job. Can't travel. You got all kinds of restrictions against them. Can't go to university. So the nuclear power plant can get established. Most people here don't know about the status of their cases ongoing in courts. Waging or attempting to wage war, or abetting waging of war against the government of India. So this isn't the nuclear industry in India. That's what they're like. One thing we noticed, the nuclear industry eventually gets power of your universities, your media, and government agencies, particularly the funding sections and legislative lawmaking sections. And then they do everything they can to destroy your countries. And their children will end up with the same jobs, then their children get the same jobs. It could take them 100 years, and that's how they plan. Every day we conduct awareness by bringing in students and publics into the nuclear power plant to show the basic science for nuclear safety. I guarantee you they don't show them the radioactive fallout from Fukushima or the ocean contamination from Fukushima, right? Like it makes me sick because there's New Mexico, there's a nuclear museum that has sleepovers for preschoolers at the museum regularly. Babysitting at the nuclear museum. Raise the kids up to be monsters early. The local police told Milton, which was one of the leaders, he was being booked for a Desadoram country trader. The country's trader. After several more protests, including one in September 2012, 5 people died at the hands of the police. We saw the worst of the police behaviors in them days. The police stopped rations and milk coming into the village for an entire year. The nuclear industry stopped rations and milk from coming into the village that was going to be poisoned by the nuclear industry. Nuclear industry done that. United Nations probably told them how to do it. Which is why we got a poll tonight, by the way, because dedicated to the scumbag United Nations, should the degenerate UN, International Atomic Energy Agency, also known as nuclear scumbags, be tried for omnicide. 49 votes with astounding 96%. Can you imagine somebody actually voted no? They never hung out. They never had the volume on when he came here and done it. I can guarantee you that. And got out of here right away. I remember I couldn't breathe when the police released gas. They killed 5, gassed them. My son was 2 years old. I sent him quickly, run away with someone else, and I jumped into the sea. Milton was allowed to leave the village in 2014 for a court hearing because he has 380 cases against him. The nuclear industry has 380 cases against an anti-nuclear activist. 380 cases against an anti-nuclear activist. You know you're good when you're getting pounded like that. But imagine, because he has children and a wife and he can't feed them. He still won't back down on top of that. Got no choice. Bless his heart. Radioactive marine pollution from Japan. It's not just marine pollution, it covered the entire planet. That's plutonium-239 fallout model. The government, the degenerate scum of Japan, plans to release 1 million tons of radioactive contaminated water. The tanks were built to trick you into thinking they weren't polluting the ocean. You can't fill the tanks up at 2.2 sieverts a liter, which is only beta, by the way, that they acknowledge. You can't filter it because if you run this through the filter, after a couple of hours, you can't get into the building with the filters. These are lethal doses. And these kinds of doses, you're going to need filters that are 20 feet thick of lead. I'm not kidding you. You can't filter it. Well, you can filter some of it. Absolutely. But you can never get near the filter. You can't move the filter. You can't change the filter. And after one day, if all you've done was put fresh water through the filter, the water coming out the other end is lethal doses by the gallon. Just stood up in the same house with it. So they had 1,000 tanks in 2013 and 1,000 tanks in 2022. How many tanks did he fill up in the last 9 years? The winner gets 5 buckets of horse shit. You got to bring your own lids. Japan plans to remove several contaminants from the water through a filtration process. Whoever wrote this should be ashamed of themselves. It remains unclear how dirty or clean the water will be when it's dumped into the sea. So they have no concept of nuclear. They just regurgitate TEPCO's version, see? But, I mean, that's the most unknown, because most people won't write about nuclear. They're terrified of talking about it. China's Japan food import ban used as a bargaining chip. No, it's used to protect the country from lunatic scumbag Japan. While Beijing seems to use the easing of the measures as a diplomatic bargaining chip, the maneuver may impact talks on China becoming a member of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Taiwan, late last year, removed all restrictions overnight from all prefectures, so they can join the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade group. And poison everybody in the country all day, every day, the children and everybody in the country, their own children, their friends, their families, their loved ones, bioaccumulating radiation every day, so corporations can join the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade pact. Is it's absurdness. So all you got to do is buy off a few people in that country that makes the decision, and everybody gets poisoned forever. This is why the International Atomic Energy Agency absolutely got to go. It's got to go. Should the United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, be tried for omnicide? Of course they should. And crimes against humanity, crimes against the ecosystem. Well, omnicide is the extermination of all species. What the hell? Let's keep it going here. May impact China becoming a member of the Trans-Pacific. So they're trying to blackmail China? Really? You really think that's a good idea? You're not careful, China just come over and pounce on you and take over Japan. China continues to restrict imports of Japanese food, including a total ban on fruit and vegetables. Japan shouldn't be growing food there. It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd to grow food in a nuclear wasteland. Canada lifted all restrictions after 93 days. Everybody else kept restrictions. 55 countries and 14 prefectures. Canada lifted all restrictions on the entire country. Nobody else would take it, so they shipped it to Canada and poisoned us. Destroyed Canada. Everybody in Canada is sick, including them. I understand Japan has strict quality controls. Come on, man. 50-year-old clerk at a Japanese food store in Beijing are no longer concerned about the impact of a nuclear accident. This is absurdness. There is no 50-year-old clerk at a Japanese food store in central Beijing. It's just somebody with a lunatic imagination. It's probably written by the International Atomic Energy Agency, and the media published it with their author. Because that's what a newspaper is now. It takes, the lobbyist gives them a story, they build up an audience of people that watch cats videos and stupid stuff, and then bang, they hit him with a nuclear story, and he seems really smart, but he didn't write anything. You'd have to be at this a long time to be able to frame everything. So a 46-year-old food importer, Chinese people who have visited Fukushima, Japan, recognize the Japanese food is sweet and fine in quality. Unfortunately, taste is not how you find radiation. When you eat it, it sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones right away. So going on taste makes you, like whoever wrote this story should be arrested. They should at least get a $50 fine for being a scumbag anyway. Would that be a crime? Beijing initially slapped restrictions on food produced in Tokyo, which was the right thing to do. Tokyo is incredibly radioactive. They can't get rid of the sewage or the water reclamation or their ash from their garbage. It's all too radioactive. Fukushima and 8 other prefectures, but measures were later introduced for other prefectures too. Constraints on the import of fruit, vegetables, dairy product, tea leaves, among all items. There is one spot in China where they import rice from the east side of Japan. Not in a good spot either. We're screening food imports for radioactive material. China looks at strontium levels rather than cesium, whereas most other countries screen for cesium. This is absurdness. You got to screen for beta, alpha, neutrons, gamma. You're not going to look for a single isotope. You literally got to be... this is how the brainwashing works, right? 14 countries and regions still continue the restrictions, and South Korea and China included. Ban imports of deadly Japanese food. So we should move to China. It'd be safer than eating the food in Canada. Prairie Island nuclear plant. How sad is that, really? Prairie Island nuclear power plant to hold emergency drill. They think they're going to stay there and fight a nuclear meltdown. Try wrapping your mind around that one. So all the sirens within 10 miles got to be screaming up to 3 minutes at a time. Should be a thrill for the children. Mommy, what's that noise? Is it police? No, son, they're just making sure they can evacuate us citizens in case of a nuclear event. If you can hear the siren, there's usually around 100 within 10 miles of a nuclear power plant, you need to move to a place where you can't hear the sirens. Like, move at least 50 to 100 kilometers away. Don't buy food in the districts of nuclear power plants because the farms are there. The drill simulated nuclear incident will involve neighboring counties and Dakota counties, as well as the city, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, you're going to run away, leave your pets behind to starve to death and die without water. You can't go back. You can't sell your property. You still got to pay your bills for the rest of your life. Yeah, it's a great deal. You lose your schools, your universities, your hospital. Nuclear is just wonderful. This stuff makes me sick. Nuclear test veterans' families trios enabling genetic studies described. 70 years later, they're going to study the victims, are they? You know, only in the United Kingdom, folks. 49 nuclear test veterans in the study. These are guinea pigs. If a university is studying you, you're a guinea pig. The last thing, unfortunately, they could be they're rare, good people, but they're radiation biologists, and they're from a university in London. And they're supported by the Nuclear Community Charity Fund. These are not attributes you want to participate in a study like that. For God's sakes, don't participate in that study. These are demons. They have a legacy of being monsters, for God's sakes. You really think they're going to just turn over a new leaf in the nuclear industry? So hilarious. Why nuclear power won't solve the energy crisis? I can give you a couple of thousand. Former Greens senator, anti-nuclear activists on the nuclear fantasies of conservative politicians. Oh, this is Australia. And why do you continue to make headlines? Oh yeah, the media loves anything nuclear headlines. This will crack you up. Non-binding nuclear waste agreements signed in South Bruce. They bought 1,600 acres of prime farmland surrounded by prime farmland to put the Canadian nuclear dump. Try making that up on your own, buddy. Demons. You have no idea how demonic the nuclear industry is. And this is CTV News Canada, so they're extra demonic demons. Look at all the useful idiots. All the Homer Simpsons right there, folks. And we've covered this subject so many times, I've lost count. Nuclear Waste Management they're supposed to be a non-profit organization that gives out millions and millions of taxpayers' dollars to the community that they want to put these disease factories in, rather than put it out somewhere where there's no nonsense. They got to do it it has to be in a community with the support of the community, or we're not doing it. They already got 19 years wasted since they got the money. They still don't have a spot. It's Michelle Stein. She's doing a really good job punching back. Super impressed with her. She's really, hopefully, she seems totally legit to me. Which is extraordinary, right? Isn't it? It's so extraordinary to find anybody that's legit. This is what the big stupid, right in the community, right in prime farmland, surrounded by farms. You want the farmers to keep farming, because otherwise the bioaccumulates all over the place. Everything is vented, repackaged. It's a disease factory. Why don't they put it somewhere where there's no conflict? It's not very far away from some of the biggest aquifers in Canada. And eventually it's going to melt down for sure, because they're putting all their eggs in one basket. Of course, that's the nuclear industry. They don't care. They encourage this. There's the mayor. Come on. We're going to get the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, non-profit organization, is throwing millions of dollars in his constituency and at him. No strings attached either. You need this, you need a new fire truck, you need a new building, you need a new office. Hey, we can do that. We're a non-profit. They're partying. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization has been partying for 19 years with $23 billion of taxpayers' money in the interest. You kind of lose faith in humanity when you see this shit. The native bands gotta say yes. The community's gotta say yes. All of Canada's most radioactive waste is to be buried under 1,500 acres of farmers' fields, and they want you to keep farming, and everything is vented all the way there when they're repackaging it and while they're waiting to seal it. Why are you putting it in people's communities for? And Michelle Stein will live right beside the disease factory. Canada's used nuclear fuel will end up in an underground facility if the community chooses to host a project. If the community chooses to host a project, they got 5.5 million used fuel bundles. That's madness. All that is sitting at sites hemorrhaging into the communities and the environment, folks. Still splitting the atom, all of that. Every country is doing it, see? It's so evil, it just seems unreal. It just seems like it's not even possible. I get that. The Non-Waste Management Organization said that while 99% of the waste radioactivity decays in the first 10 years. First off, if the Non-Waste Management Organization tells you anything, it's a lie. This is what we've seen in them for many years. It remains dangerously radioactive indefinitely, claiming that it loses 99% of its radioactivity in the first 10 years. These are lunatics. And seriously, like, it defies rationale that people like this could actually exist. Officials to test the siren at Oakney Nuclear Station. We've covered that place a lot of times, haven't we? Oh, dirty nuclear is the only way you can really describe nuclear. Deadly and dirty. Duke Energy. Alerting the public that we're conducting a siren test around a disease factory known as a nuclear station in June. The brutal outdoor warning sirens will be tested multiple times during the week. From 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., expect your dog and your children to curl up in a corner and suck their thumbs and tour. This is separate from the quarterly test they'll also conduct at the facility. 20-second bursts as long as 3 minutes. This is typical. We hear that. That's a long time to listen to these disgusting. There was one guy who used to call into the show. If I was live and they were testing the siren, he would call in and play the siren. He said, when I hear it, I gets the gun and runs around. I think we're being invaded. Although a siren might sound multiple times as part of the testing, no public action. You become desensitized. When you finally have an accident, they're not going to use the siren. There's zero possibility. All the accidents we've seen, they've never used a siren a single time. They were put there by activists, not by the industry. If there were ever a real emergency at the plant requiring the sirens to be sound, people are going to ignore it. German Air Chief, NATO should be ready for Russia nuclear strike. NATO should be ready for a Russia nuclear strike. That's what I mean. You only need a few crazies. International Sea Power Symposium. International Sea Power Symposium. A command of the German Air Force, the general, said NATO must be prepared for nuclear threats from Russia and be able to strike a blow to deter Russia. Nuke Russia. Nuke them before they nuke them. That's what they're saying. NATO needs to be sitting there ready to push the button. Just give them lots of coffee and get it over with. For reliable deterrence, we need both the means and political will to use the nuclear deterrent. Usually when people get to the general, they're lunatics. They're not war hawks, they're lunatics. They're war hawks until they get there, then they're lunatics. NATO countries should be prepared to use nuclear weapons if necessary. He meant the following. The media had to go and apologize for what he said. So no, he actually meant the following. NATO countries should be prepared to use nuclear weapons if Russia were to strike first. And how many people really believes that's what he meant? He was saying a deterrent. Don't be afraid. If Russia starts getting cocky, then go ahead and nuke them. Let God sort of move. Commenting on the possibility of Russia invading NATO member state, the commander of the German Air Force advised put not to encroach on territories of the North Atlantic Bloc. The North Atlantic Bloc is 30 militaries that are ready to go to war in the drop of a hat, ready to shake and boogie. The Non-Waste Management Organization preliminary safety report suggests both remaining sites are suitable for deep geological repository. And to show you some buffoon in a stupid jacket with stupid mitts on looking at a core sample. That right there, that's where the dinosaur was scratching his arse. The Non-Waste Management Organization, now also known as NWMO, has now published its confidence and safety reports for each of the two potential communities to host a deep geological repository to store Canada's nuclear fuel somewhere in the next 100 years, apparently. The not-for-profit organization giving out millions in all the communities. There's only 21 communities originally signed on. They passed out hundreds of thousands to millions in every single community. Hi, we're the nuclear waste. Here's some money. Have a nice day. So to get everybody in the whole region addicted to free money, no strings attached. Responsible fund, that's non-profit. Oh, okay. Somebody made a profit. It wasn't the Canadians. Responsible funding a suitable location to construct and operate. The not-for-profit organization. The not-for-profit organization, which is the organizations that created it in the first place. And after 70 years, every university on the planet put their head together and said, got it. Let's bury it in your community in the middle of prime farmland and vent everything into an environment where we're doing it for 100 years. The definition of evil doesn't really do it justice. Machiavellian, where by nature each individual is Machiavellian. Is by nature is evil. That's what we're seeing. Our work in Canada is grounded in decades of international research and the scientific consensus that a big hole in the ground is the best spot, just like Donneray, to dump all the nuclear waste. The deep geological repositories represent the best solution, a big hole in the ground. Community engagement. It'll make the final site decision, and we'll only choose a site with a willing host community. Don't care if it takes 1,000 years. Because as long as it's splitting the atom and hemorrhaging into environment, job accomplished. The idea is not to come up with a solution, obviously. Cause an incredible divide by giving one side of the community huge amounts of money and making them fight each other. And ultimately blow it out of proportion, and the nuclear non-waste management organization will pull out and start over again somewhere else, and there will never be a solution, and it'll always hemorrhage into the environment, guaranteed the extinction of all species. Community South Bruce is set to hold a referendum sometime following this year's municipal elections to determine the willingness among the victims. And the Saji Obijiwa Nation natives will also have to express its willingness, and they already said they're not, for the project to move forward, the non-waste management organization said. Safety is our highest priority, said the crazies who created it in the first place. It drives everything we do, from project design, engineering, environmental research, interweaving indigenous knowledge into our work and engaging with the community. Laurie Swami, the non-waste management organization president, CEO, in a release, we've covered her at least 24 times. If you asked her what a human being was, she'd like, gee, I don't know. I don't actually know none. I just know savages in the nuclear industry. Japan to give plutonium to the crazies. They're going to give the spent fuel to France. France is going to make mixed oxide fuel out of it and ship the rest back. And return of high-level radioactive waste to Japan. This is crazy, because every time at a single nuclear power plant, they're going to start to remove the 731 assemblies, which is like 100 fuel rods. They're 12 feet long, 18 pounds each. From April 2023 and completed by 2027. And they got to ship all whatever's left over from the mixed oxide fuel back. Whatever doesn't leach into the environment, of course. Because a huge amount of the reprocessing at La Hague in France is going to... She has 500 security guards. Dorset Council granny climate protesters will not face charges. And they were anti-nuclear too. Totally caught me off guard. The politicians were upset that the grannies who came in glued their hands to the desk and demanded the council done something to help change the climate for the better. And they also said nuclear was stupid. I was like, really? We also asked Councillor O'Leary to think again about nuclear. It takes over 30 years for Winfrit's nuclear waste to be removed. It's an enormous problem in society, one that needs to be reduced, not expand. It appears that taxpayer money should be invested in genuine, clean, and non-risk sustainable renewable energies. Awesome, grannies. Bless your hearts. Harvard graduate. So as soon as they graduate from university, they're better than you now. Well, I'm a Harvard grad. Nuclear's the way to go. You see it all the time, eh? A chilling 1970 study predicted the collapse of global civilization by 2040 might not be too wide of the mark, according to respected sustainability buffins. Nice pictures. Gaia Harrington, who studies sustainability at a prestigious American university. Do you got any idea how many scumbags have actually come out of that university that we've covered over the years? You got any idea how many people at that university are in jail for murder and raping children? And embezzlement of funding? And the list goes on and on and on. She's dressed very expensive, I noticed. That's not an accident. Showing you atomic bomb effects is what they're showing you there. Our generation is the first to experience climate change. That's not true. Climate change hundreds of thousands of years in core samples and ice samples. World War III nuclear Armageddon could be caused by the world water supply being cut off. Well, that's one of the doctrines of every country, that if another country threatens your water, you should go to war. Nuclear missiles to the rescue. Lack of water security has already led to conflicts around the world. Nuclear missiles to the rescue. Brainwashing. Yeah, it is heartbreaking when we see these pictures. I always say to people, like in Canada, you don't know how lucky you are. You really don't. You have fresh water everywhere you look. Except for your tap, which is poisoned with chemicals. Net zero carbon goal is unattainable. The goal of the U.S. government to achieve net zero carbon emission by 2050 per Paris Agreement. Three-step analysts established this as an impossible goal. So you'd have to build each year almost 1 million wind turbines, or 881 nuclear power plants, or 31 each year. So last year we brought on 333 nuclear power plants worth of renewables in a single 12-month, with all kinds of restrictions, I might add, which is 291 gigawatts of renewables. To achieve net zero. Net zero, which was Miles Allen paper. He got a nice cushy job for that one. The United Nations took it and disseminated. Now everybody is stuck with this monster on everybody's back because United Nations hates humanity and species. As a reality check, we researched most capacity installed in 1 year since 2000. So 5,600 wind turbines, one nuclear plant, and 21,500 megawatts of solar power. But actually, in 2021 was a record renewable energy year of 290 gigawatts of renewables, which is equal to 333 large nuclear power plants came online last year. There was around 300 nuclear power plants the year before it came online of renewables. It's happening, but they're just not talking about it. Regulation decision to help accelerate fusion energy process. So they spend a ridiculous amount of money on churn and on fusion. If all those companies can't try to come up with solutions for storage and for renewables, we would solve. Like, the right way to do it is wind and solar backed up by geothermal and tidal energy, and that's backed up by pumped hydro storage and compressed air storage for peak power. That's the solution, obviously. Unless we come up with new, more exciting technologies, and there's quite a few of them out there. One of the storage we see promising is actually storing water underwater, compressing it with the depth. Our work continues to create jobs and drive economic growth. We're talking about nuclear again, right? Fusion continues to create jobs, yeah, and you might never solve it. But if you all went to work and come up with solutions for the real problem we got going right now, we'd probably solve them. But you're so, right? These are the people that get these jobs are the inbreeds of the savage industry. Saint-Chilis hosts an IAEA meeting for building a national security detection architect. In Africa, joined 3 other countries in a regional workshop to develop a roadmap for building a national security detection architect for nuclear and radioactive materials out of regulatory control. So they had a big presentation from the nuclear industry. This is International Atomic Energy Agency doing shit like that. Hinkley Point mobilizes over 8,000. We covered that last night. Surrounded by farms on top of that. It's absurd. We got to pull up. Should the degenerate United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency, also known as the scumbag IAEA, be tried for omnicide, which is extermination of all species? And the proper answer, of course, is, of course, Dana. Thank you, by the way. Australia reaffirms commitment to nuclear submarines. What the fuck is Australia doing with nuclear submarines? Who the hell is going to invade Australia? Nobody. They get the highest cancer rates per 100,000 people on the planet because Britain went down there and blew up 700 nuclear conventional dirty bombs and a lot of nuclear weapons and waited for the wind to blow across the country. Lithuania bans transit of sanctioned Russian goods. Again, you're not hurting Russia, you're hurting the victims who needed the coal, the metals, the construction material, and the technology. Because they're part of the crazies. Addition of 3,275 megawatts enhanced power generation of India. This is, we're still tilting at windmills. This was a piece of shit who wrote this story. Nuclear energy is actually a pretty good way to produce energy without having the harmful CO2 effects. This is madness to even suggest that nuclear is the most carbon-intensive energy, period, by a large margin on top of that. How many windmills can we build that now kill more than 500,000 birds? Now they're saying they're killing 500,000 birds a year. Studies showed almost no birds die in collisions with the wind turbines, and now if you paint them a certain color, there's zero. But that's what the industry does, right? It just all day, every day, it just comes out with propaganda. One of the authors of the accord that dissolved in the Soviet Union, people's pensions and that, died at 76. Unfortunately, he lived that long. Imagine, instead of quitting your job, you dissolved the country and destroyed everybody's pensions and patents. And call yourself a politician. Like, my God, boy. Co-authors of the Belov Accords that effectively ended the existence of the Soviet Union. Yeah, what a disgusting betrayal. How the hell can politicians have that kind of power? It's absurd. Lens design adapted to fit existing radiation tolerant is the right word there. It tolerates it and then it dies. But did you know there's a lot of high-end camera lenses that, because they might have 12 lenses, 14 lenses in a row, but the last one will have some radiation isotopes, will keep dust from settling on the lens. Will keep the dust from settling on the lens. That's not what this story is about, but that's how evil the nuclear industry will use radiation where many things would work better. Japan must help reform the dysfunctional UN Security Council. Well, dysfunctional. Should the degenerate UN International Atomic Energy Agency be tried for omnicide? 55 votes, 40 thumbs up. So people feel really strongly about that. I'm seeing doubles that time, I bet. Russia's invasion of Ukraine spotlighted the dysfunction of the United Nations Security Council. Why, you really think that they're a security council? Why are you taking your orders from a corporation that has no sovereignty over your countries? How does that actually work? Boris Johnson taken to the hospital. Looks, unfortunately, they're going to make his nose bigger and deeper or something. A routine operation on his... What a horrible person he turned out to be. Is there anybody in that position we haven't said that about, I wonder? Their job is not to be good people. Their job is just to be scum. Air Force to conduct soaring eagle exercise Monday. Now, if North Korea has a soaring eagle exercise, the whole world media will come out screaming and crying. Please, somebody stop them. They burnt down every village in North Korea, every village. Napalmed it, where they're using gelled gasoline, so it sticks on the children and burns them to a crisp. They burnt down every community in North Korea. They wanted the minerals. North Korea has some of the best minerals and precious metals on the planet. And so now, that was United Nations done that, by the way. That was one of their first wars where they went in the early 50s, and 7 million dead or something, mostly civilian. Tens of millions wounded and traumatized, particularly the children. The United Nations now for almost 70 years has isolated them. Because they were picking on South Korea, which they've been doing for 1,000 years. The United Nations was created. The first thing they done was went and tried to flatten North Korea. And in every other country, North Korea didn't attack them or any other country. Never has. But every day is the boogeyman. Today's climate and energy headlines. When media has a climate headlines, you're talking about lunatics. Another M5 level quake jolts central Japan. This was on land, I think. Hang on. Yeah, this was on the very tip of that peninsula on the east side. Let me go back to that, sorry. Don't trust the media. No abnormalities reported at the nuclear-powered facilities. Every time there's a story about earthquakes in a pro-nuclear country, somewhere in the first paragraph you're going to see, there's no problem with the nuclear power plant. And the earthquake only happened 6 minutes ago. Yeah, but there's no problem at the power plant. Yeah, but the power plant is like a big city. It'll take you weeks. No, there's no problem there. TEPCO would have told us. It's just something else. It's some kind of weird cult. That's what media is. Some weird, bizarre death cult. The central government said intensity lower is 6, which is an 8-point-something earthquake on the international scale. Many people find it difficult to remain standing. People in the area should be cautious of more earthquakes with an intensity of around lower 6, which is around an 8 on the international scale. Good God, we got through it all. We got through it all. That's the tsunami hitting Fukushima. Let's do it again. Don't blink. That's the tsunami hitting Fukushima. And these waves came in at multiple speeds, right? All the pictures are zoomed right in. Watch this coming up here. You get the pictures of... How stupid is that, really? There's 8,000 people there every day, Dana. They burn 7,000 suits a day, paper suits there every day, according to TEPCO. Digging up soil. Digging a hole. No wide-angle shots. The top of reactor 4 or reactor 2. That's we don't really see that angle very often. There's the remains of reactor 3. They were still, that was obviously, because last year they said they got all the fuel out of the pool. That was 80, 90 feet above the wreckage to your right. It doesn't exist. And that's reactor 4 in the background. And they cut that stack off. They cut the stack off. The bottom of this stack right here is around 25 sieverts. So how deadly is it by the reactor 3? Well, we made it through all the news we didn't make through on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. We got through all those stories. Feels like I just done a marathon. Voice is holding up a bit better, but I shouldn't have said anything. The voice held up pretty good. At least it's not raw like the last couple of nights, right? So that's huge. We're trying to get back on track. Trying to get back on 5 days a week schedule. That's going pretty good. It's just the censorship is over the top. They took down my site last year with 24,200 subscribers. 24,201 or 24,199 with 24,200 subscribers. It's been like that for about 5 years. Never got an extra subscriber. I'm just tickled pink. We got through all the news that because a lot of it goes into the black hole, right? So we got a poll tonight, big poll. Should the degenerate United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency, aka IAEA, be tried for omnicide? Well, this is not... Give me a second here. We got to go in. Because when I go live, Google does this trick with my account. I'm going to go to show more. And keep scrolling. It never stops. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Allow embedding. So I have to click that so any websites that are trying to embed my video can. Even though I already done it. And so when I originally do the preamble, to the show, which is what you're looking at, as soon as I hit save, and now the preamble is up, I have to go back in and set allow embedding. Once the show starts, I have to go back in. Typically, I'll go back in and set it right then. Otherwise, people can't stream it on their sites. And then after the show is over, there's a box there that says share to subscribers. And that is dysfunctional. Same as my last account with 24,200 subscribers for 5 years. So I'm going to say goodnight, I guess. Had 2 donations last night. Wow. James, Lucia donated another 124. James, you go, bro. Thank you. That's a big deal. And Nick P donated $31 last night. So we got to raise, I guess, close to 1,000, I suppose, over the next few weeks. We got to renew the site. We got to license the trailers, the boat, for another 12 months. So, we got to do repairs on the boats. We got to put new sides in the boat. Just the thought of it makes me sick to my guts. And we got to get parts for the engine after everything else is done. Summer's still not here on the East Coast. Let's come in and say goodnight to everybody. Port Angeles. Too smart to meet her. There's a great one. James Lucid. Thanks again, James, by the way. Thank you. And P. Swear. And Stephen Young. Hi, Stephen. My friend, I hope you're doing good. Nick Moulton, Lake. Everybody was digging his grave. My eyes are not what they used to be, I noticed tonight. Kevin Blanche is here, and Kevin is a worldwide famous nuclear scholar and activist. Ryan Underwood, hi Ryan. Don Vincent. Colette's out there somewhere, watching this now or later. Swanee D is out there in the mornings on my side of the planet. Richard. Hi, Richard. Hi, everybody. I spent a lot of time today trying to fix the power washer. They don't make it easy to take those things apart. And it turns out where the wand is pressurized, that piece of dirt tore apart. And so I epoxied it back together. It took a friggin' hour and a half to get it apart, the casing. But, you know, all these tools we picked up over the winter, man. And my door skin was giving me problems on the truck. So I took that off, and the bolt was stripped. And so we got that out in short order because we had the equipment. And ended up destroying that, so we retapped it and put it back together. Everything's perfect. It's a huge deal. Big win. And then I got all the tools finally today and organized them in the new shed. And the boat's right, the boat right there at my fingertips. The weather's starting to get good. Nick Daniels. I'm clicking, but I'm not reading. You're looking? I apologize to everybody. Jeffrey Brown. Hi, Jeff. Christopher. Jeff Poor. Not to be confused with Jeff Brown. Jeffrey Brown. Adam. Hi, Adam the Mushroom. Mushrooms bioaccumulate radiation worse than any other food on the planet. So be careful where you get your mushrooms to. Angel's Place. Hi, Angel's Place. I said hi earlier, actually, because we never really get to see you during the live show. Extra hugs for Stephen Young. Dana Nasana. Hi, Dana. Thank you again for moderating and chipping in and helping you out all the time. David Holly. Ayers. We're almost through. My favorite part of the show is where I say goodnight to everybody. Hi, everybody, I should say. Another Gmail. I'll come down to the most recent comments any second now. Folks, like, I don't know how to sugarcoat stuff, so I apologize because I'm pretty rough around the edges. You got to realize what I do for a 24-hour period. It's craziness. Yeah, it looks like we got most people that I can quick scroll because I was chatting and not looking earlier. Very rare for me not to pay attention. Apologize to anybody that I might have missed. Yeah, unfortunately, mushrooms are the most scariest food you can eat when it comes to nuclear. It bioaccumulates like bacteria, certain fungus does. Fungus is one of the worst ones for bioaccumulating radiation. But there's a really strange thing about that, isn't there? I should look into that a bit more deeper. Thank you, Adam. Hugs for you, my friend. Did I get everybody? I got everybody. It's just when you're doing a show for a couple of hours, it's hard. It's hard to stop. So much to get everything working, get everything transferred, gather up all the documentation, get it imported. I gotta say, it's another full day. Didn't get a chance to go anywhere today, just work. And that's the first good day we had in quite a while, so that's good news. And we know now the DCA has gone through customs. So it's here in Canada, it's on its way, and we got to get our hands on it sooner the better. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night for the last show of the week, hopefully, unless there's earthquake or breaking news. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody for the final show tomorrow night. Same time as this one. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. And thanks for coming by. Have a great night. Timber Traveler, gotcha. And Brian S. That's okay, Brian. You have a great night, folks. Take care.